Hello and welcome to Super Saturdays, a comic book media podcast where we rank media by its story, impact, and visuals to figure out if these projects will stand the test of time. I'm Damon A.
And I'm Jay Hayward, and each episode will be focusing on your favorite comic books, TV shows, and movies. And this week, Damon and I are taking the subspace highway to the distant, fantastical land of Toronto, Canada. We're talking love, betrayal, music, and so much more as we scour the tale of Scott Pilgrim versus the world.
Hello and welcome, Soups, to an amazing episode that's been in the works ever since this show was conceived. Okay, so, as usual, you guys would know that we always start with asking what was happening in the comic book world. But Jay and I thought it would be best to introduce a new segment, especially because if we were to do our usual thing, we'd be talking about two different dates. And
Yeah, too much history, and we want to get to the point of the show.
yeah, and this week, within the last weeks, there's been a lot of big news that's came out.
So
So
much.
this is our new segment that we'd like to call News Roundup.
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Okay, news roundup.
Okay, so the
First,
first bit of news is the Spider Verse has been delayed to 2026.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, originally it was going to come out in March of 2024, less than a year from the first film. Now, this isn't unheard of. Pirates of the Caribbean is weirdly enough the first thing that comes to mind. They did Dead Man's Chest and At World's End.
Avengers
Now,
did that too.
that Avengers did that too. That's right. They had made Infinity War and Endgame at the same time. So it's not unheard of, but that's live action stuff, guys. And for those who have seen Across the Spider Verse, which looking at the box office success being on top of the charts for like since the film has come out, um, I'm sure everyone has. The animation in that is stellar. However, not worth a lot of the overtime and over asking of the corporate over at Sony.
Yeah, a lot of the workers animators have like come out and have been on record saying that the working conditions for that movie was kind of ass. There was a lot of rewrites that happened behind the scenes. There were a lot of like deadlines that they needed to be pushed, and some of them even said that it's honestly surprising of how good the movie came out. And one animator even said that there's about four different versions of the movie floating around in theaters. So there's some
Yeah.
theaters who don't see small little bits of clips or whatever, but that would explain why I went to see it twice. And then the second viewing, there's little things I didn't notice, and I was like, oh, I don't remember that being in there, but okay.
Now, one thing that's also really cool about that is that's actually very common in film history. It's not something that you see very often now, but that happened a lot, even mainly with live action stuff. Depending on different city or county, every version of the film could be cut. And for those who are big Clue fans, when you were at the theater, a different ending would be different for each theater as to who did it at the end of Clue. So it's nothing too unheard of. But the fact that it's just so sprinkled in, it makes people wonder how they're going to handle it for digital. I think they're going to put like deleted scenes and call these alternative versions deleted scenes and go from there. But who knows? Still, like wild, right, Damon? Like that is just
Yeah.
fucking insane that they were able to do that in such a crunch time,
Yeah.
as well as the short, the Miles Morales short, where he has the panic attack.
Did that come out yet?
I'm not sure, but the fact that they're doing it on top
Yeah.
of everything else is like they don't have to do that, but they just kind of want to do it.
I love it.
No, we didn't ask for it, you know.
I love it. Spider Verse was fantastic, and I hope everyone goes and sees it. Our next
Yep,
thing on News Roundup, we got some video game news. So,
tons.
some of these games have already been announced, but just wanted to put it out there that they're still being worked on. Spider Man 2 comes out later this year. We got a big trailer
Woo!
for Venom. We even got a little snippet of Tony Todd as Venom.
Exciting.
Candyman is Venom. Love that shit. Wonder Woman is still a game that's being worked on. I'm pretty sure it's being made by Monolith, and the game is going to be open world and focus primarily on the Greek and like ancestry, lexicon, and all that type of stuff. With
So ambitious.
yeah, Wolverine is still a game being worked on by the Insomniac team. Rumor has it that Steve Blum may be the voice of Wolverine in this game.
Oh, what a fantastic choice,
Yeah,
honestly.
he's been voicing Wolverine for a couple of years now. He's almost like the quintessential voice right now. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense to have him there. We still haven't gotten a whole lot of look at really anything, no gameplay, no I'm sure they're working a lot on Spider-Man still, making sure that that's all good. So, but I'm sure back team we'll get some stuff soon, but just some graphics. Couple I think a new poster has come out that I seen floating around,
has
which
there?
looked really cool. I think so. It could have just been a fan thing that I had seen, but if not, it there's still excitement for the Wolverine game, which is really cool.
Okay, and
I also saw, if you don't mind, Damon,
no,
I'm going
go
to take
for
this
it.
one. Um, and I'm really excited for this one. We're getting an Iron Man game. Like we're
Yeah,
getting an Iron Man game in Unreal Engine 5. It's going to look fantastic. Only thing I'm worried about is that it's going to be from EA, which can be a big hit or miss company with these kind of things.
yeah. And they haven't made a Marvel game in such a long time. Actually, EA had a whole contract with them back in like 2005. Back in
Mm.
2005
Mm.
for this game called Marvel Nemesis, which was kind of like a precursor to Marvel's Ultimate Alliance.
I remember that. Yep.
Hmm
Did you ever get to play that game at all,
I
Damon?
did. I loved that game. It was very dark. And what other game will have Spider-Man say that's what we call a web slicking ass kicking or whatever. Like, damn.
Straight from
Honestly,
the DS to you.
yeah. No, honestly, early 2000s Marvel was a different time because it was a lot more mature in the ways that I feel like Marvel today wouldn't do.
Not at all. They were really trying some wild stuff, and they had a much more serious tone. It felt like they were kind of competing with DC in their own weird little ways when you think about it, which kind of makes sense at that time because that was kind of the studio that was doing well in that kind of more cinematic feel at that time. Obviously, things have shifted, but at the very least, they got like more of their properties out. We had seen good few Superman films and Batman films at that point, you know.
One big thing that I wanted to say that came out a little bit earlier this week. The
Yes,
Batman Arkham games are coming to the Switch this fall. Did you
dude.
hear about that, Jay?
Yeah, I have heard about that. That was for those who don't know, I'm a huge Nintendo Switch fan. I have the special edition Splatoon 3 Switch because I'm a huge Splatoon 3 fan. I'm a That's my favorite video game console of all time is Nintendo. When I heard about this, I was like there's no fucking way that this little engine that could can handle Arkham Knight when they couldn't even handle a PC port in 2015 when the game came out. So I have no idea how it's going to look. Arkham Asylum, I'm expecting is going to look great, but that's a 360 game. Arkham City, I'm a little nervous. Like I'm
Well, it was
nervous
on the
that
Wii.
no, that was the Wii U.
They're probably just porting over the Wii U version.
If they are, that would be cool because that was only for the Wii U. The Armored Edition, that's what I kind of want personally because I never got to try that. But I also know that all the DLC is going to be available, so like being able to play the Joker. I will say I have bought the Arkham trilogy on everything when it came out one by one, when they've had it in a box set. Some of my favorite games. I will buy it for the Switch. Will not be my primary way to buy it or to play it, but in the same way how I bought BioShock for the Switch. What are you thinking, Damon? Are you going to get it?
Fuck yes, and it's wild because I actually was thinking about this a while ago because I got my Xbox 360 out because Damon doesn't have a big console because he sold
Mm-mm.
his when he to get money. Got my Xbox 360 out, and I was really tempted to go to a store and buy some of the Arkham games because I've been missing it. I recently got Ultimate Spider-Man on the Xbox and been playing that, and I'm like,
Oh,
kind of
dude,
want
that's
some.
so sick.
Yeah, love that game. The game still holds up to me. All right, so it was announced yesterday at the time of this recording. The leads for James Gunn's new Superman movie, Superman Legacy. He announced the casting of Superman and Lois Lane. Playing Lois Lane is Rachel Brosnahan. Love her. Started watching Miss Maisel last summer, and I gotta say that show is fantastic. And it's wild because I actually
Yes.
was thinking about right when I started watching it last year. I was thinking about how she would make a really good Lois Lane.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was my thoughts. That was literally my thoughts. Even when remember Jay, I was telling you about Man of Steel issue number 2, how that is
Mm.
is just Lois Lane's issue. It's told from her perspective. I was
Yes.
imagining that like when I was reading that. She
Okay.
fantastic, great, great. And then
Okay then.
for Superman, this was actually a fan choice. David Cornsweet has been
Corn.
casted
David
as
Cornswell.
Clark Kent slash Superman.
Wild. Now,
Yeah,
I only know him for Pearl. That's the only thing I've seen him in. And I mean, I didn't have much to really say about him in that, but when I look at him, when I see his headshots, I can see it, and it feels like kind of cool, you know?
yeah, he has the look. He was good in Pearl, and honestly, I had to go. I kind of knew he was gonna get casted. Had a strong
You
feeling,
did? No, you
especially
didn't. Come
I
on.
did because
Nah.
the shortlist for like who is doing the screen tests last week came out. He was on the screen. He was on the short list. Nicholas Holt was also on the short list for Superman as well too.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
He's a great actor, but he doesn't really have the right look.
No.
Uh,
Not like how this guy does.
yeah, Emma Mackey was also on a list for Lois Lane as well too.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. Interesting. What a interesting little short list. I like how it's not like some bigger like named Hollywood kind of actors either here, especially like with David.
my question for you, Jay, though, is what's your thoughts on this casting?
So I don't know these actors very well personally. I don't know a lot of their work, but they fit the look, and that's kind of like the big thing for me, I guess. Like, is if they have that kind of like boldness, energy that the characters kind of need, and I feel like these guys can make it work. The way how I've seen like the headshots together as the idea of them being that on-screen couple, I think they can maybe make that interesting dynamic even just from how I know James Gunn's going to have it look cinematically.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you on that. In all honesty, go check out Marvelous Miss Maisel. That fucking show is it's great. It's a fun time. It actually ended this year, I think.
Yes, it did. I heard about that. So now it's gone into Jay's radar of a show has ended. Now I can watch it and tell everyone about it 2 years too late.
Yeah, but
Uh,
that's the news. That's their news roundup.
Damon, are you ready to get in the meat and potatoes of today's episode?
Yes, I am ready. Okay, so Jay, I got a question for you. What was your first introduction to Scott Pilgrim?
I'm so glad that you asked. So, I had heard about Scott Pilgrim a little bit in high school, but I really didn't have a huge interest in watching it. Um, couldn't really tell you why, but it was on like my list, like backlog that I think everyone makes of, oh, I'm gonna watch that sometime. Ever since streaming services have become such a norm in people's life, to becomes like the new doom scrolling. Scott
Mm.
Pilgrim was one of those that became part of my doom scrolling. And one time I went out, like up north to a lake for like a couple of days, good few days, and I brought a portable DVD player and a whole bunch of movies that I had never watched. I had watched Rise of the Guardians, I had watched 2001: Space Odyssey, and I had watched Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I would watch these after I had had a wonderful day out up north in Amish country, getting wonderful cheeses and breads, and it was just a cozy little place where I could just pop in a movie and go to sleep. And I had that with like Rise of the Guardians. I had to like watch some of it, fall asleep, and watch it again, like the rest of the different night. But with Scott Pilgrim, it had me hooked beginning to end. I had no clue what the movie was going to be like before. I thought that the poster was wild, and I didn't know anyone who had really talked about it. So having the opportunity to have gone in so blind to it was such a treat. I had loved it to death, and I wanted to know more about it. And ever since then, I have gotten the graphic novels, or yeah, they would be like graphic novels or comics, however you really want to describe it. And I have the game when it was re-released. I have it digitally on my Switch. I have a physical version that came with a card from Limited Run Games, and yeah, I also have like a Ramona Flowers Funko Pop. Scott Pilgrim became one of my comfort movies, and I got to see it like 4 or 5 times in the movie theater during its anniversary. It was like its 11-year anniversary because COVID was its 10-year, and I went. Damon, you know, I went so many times to that,
Yeah, one of
and
the times
I
we went
just
together, I'm pretty sure.
yes, we did because I told you you had to see it in the like on that screen. How about yourself? What do you think about Scott Pilgrim? What was your first time?
Yeah, my first time watching Scott Pilgrim would have to be on demand. Uh, it was on demand, and prior to that, I remember when
Uh,
I
a
actually,
classic on the show.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, but just
no,
a
you're
classic.
good. I remember back in 2010 when the movie was being advertised like crazy on Adult Swim, especially because they had like this little clip of like that little origin. It was literally the excerpt that we're going to talk about in the book, where you learned a little bit about Scott's background when they were in high school and he met his one friend, Lisa Miller, and that was animated, and they had the same voice actors from the movie. I remember that was playing on Adult
Yes.
Swim, and I remember there's just like Adult Swim fucking advertised the fuck out of this movie, and I remember I wanted to see it, but we just never went to go see it in theaters. So then it was on
Mm.
demand. Finally watched it on demand. I liked it a lot, but I didn't really understand it because this is Damon in middle school, not understanding it.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and I'd say I finally went to like rewatch it. When I went to go see it in theaters for that anniversary, and I seen it in Dolby, so the audio is fantastic. I love the fucking music.
Yes.
That was an experience. Like I was really sucked in primarily because of the music. The music was fantastic, and I think a little bit prior to that, I was doing a little bit of research on the comics and just the story itself because I was very curious. But that curiosity was primarily like poked because of like Jay, because Soups she was obsessed, so we were talking about it a lot. So I was just
Yeah. Oh
curious.
yeah.
I was curious, and I was watching this one video that's by Dominic Noble, where he was going into detail about the differences between the book and the movie, and it poked my interest to really want to read the comics a little bit more. So that would be my experience with Scott Pilgrim. And one thing I just want to add is Scott Pilgrim is an asshole. That's all I have to say.
Yes. Scott Pilgrim is a prick,
He is a
but he gets better. But he is a prick.
mm, there's certain things that are irredeemable, but we're not going to talk about when he gets better for the sake of this episode, Soups, and also because Damon only has the oversized Volume One / colored edition of Scott Pilgrim
Yeah.
that
And I got
collects.
the classic black and white versions with a couple variant covers.
Correct. So for the sake of this video, we are going over the first two volumes of Scott Pilgrim, which is Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life and
And
Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And we're also going to be going back and forth a little bit about the movie as well too. This is going to be a
yep.
discussion. And for the sake of
Like
this
always.
exactly. For the sake of this video, we're naming this video Scott Pilgrim Part 1 cuz who knows? If you guys like it enough, we might come back for a part 2.
Big episode this week.
Yeah. So, are you ready to dive in, Jay?
Oh, Damon, take it away.
Let's dive in, Soups. Okay, so Scott Pilgrim is a series of graphic novels by Canadian author and comic book artist Brian Lee O'Malley. The series is about Scott Pilgrim, a slacker and part-time musician who lives in Toronto, Ontario, and plays bass in a band. He falls in love with an American delivery girl, Ramona Flowers, but he must defeat her 7 evil exes in order to date her in peace. That is a very generalized summary because there's so much more. But
So much.
there's a couple of things I want to talk about. Just a little bit notes. I remember a while ago, Jay, we were talking about this, and I think we are talking about this maybe 2 years ago. And I was talking about how I was reading the book, and I noticed that like it's really they make a big point to show that Scott has like an X-Men logo on his like sleeve. They even show it in the
Oh
movie.
yeah.
They make more of a big deal about it in the book, but in the movie, it's like a subtle like little joke. That's it. And obviously, this isn't a Marvel story, but I'm pretty sure you told me that like there's a fan theory that Brian Lee O'Malley made this book in mind that like, oh, this takes place in the same world as the X Men. It's like if you look at it like that, it makes it even more interesting. And I couldn't stop thinking about that during this reread.
Yeah. No, the idea is like there is just this X-Men quality. Brian Lee O'Malley is a big X-Men fan, and I think I could be wrong because I was reading a whole lot of this more in like 2021. So I didn't really refresh myself a whole lot, but I believe Brian Lee O'Malley did get to work a little bit on some X-Men comics after this or around this time. I can't quite recall, but regardless, he's a big X-Men fan, and he made it really work as well for the universe that he's in and having that kind of like mind. And it also really puts into perspective the kind of normacy that exists for these people to just have these super cosmic fights and then kind of just go back to their day to day. Like this is normal everywhere in the world, and it's just kind of like in a world where it's like come to its weird peace with it. Now, it is really so warped and surreal where Brian Lee really does make it like its own take of like a lot of video game fighting influence, which you see a lot in Edgar Wright's film. But yeah, no, X-Men I think is something that was a huge launch off point for Scott Pilgrim to even be a thing.
Yeah, because like honestly, like me reading it, it kind of is like okay, that would kind of explain why they just accept everything as the norm. Like, oh, okay, cool, this is what happens. I learned recently that like something that isn't explained in the book, but Brian Lee O'Malley has said is like canon to the book, is that when a person dies or like when you see Scott kill one of the exes or whatever, and they turn into coins, they're not actually dead. They just respawn back at home.
Yeah, they respond back at home and they're good. Like they're just like, "Oh, I'm better than this." Like they just kind of become good people. And
Yeah.
so they still exist in this Scott Pilgrim-esque world, which I think is so that way Scott or Brian Lee O'Malley can always, if he ever wanted to, I don't think he will ever, but could do stuff again in the future. He likes doing a lot of art, especially of Ramona Flowers and Kim Pine. He really likes drawing like his women characters a lot. I couldn't really tell you why. I make it sound like it's really creepy, but no, like he takes a lot of time to draw a lot of fan favorites, and it kind of makes it feel like these characters still live and breathe with him
Hmm.
past this point. And you see it with a lot of different like anniversary concert stuff that happened, and the way how people have appreciated the film. Sex Bomb has become a staple for a lot of people. I have Garbage Truck plays in my Spotify playlist. If you remember that song, Damon, it's
Yeah.
before Matthew Patel comes out the first X. I love that song.
I love the music in that movie. The music in that movie is really, really good. I gotta say something with So for this episode, I did a little bit of research, and some of it's just already stuff I knew about. But the Scott Pilgrim movie did not do good at the box office. Like it was a flop, and I think based off of the reviews, it was primarily because people didn't understand what it was supposed to be. Because some people thought it was supposed to be like an homage to video games, and I think they even tried marketing it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or they tried to market it as like a dude bro type of like thing or whatever. But a lot of people didn't realize it was like not really. Well, it is a reference to it, but it's more like the book referenced it. So they were doing mostly what the book was doing. But
Yeah,
to put it to live action, people were like, "Well, what are you referencing?" Because people didn't realize it was a comic book.
I think it was just yeah a little too. This is gonna sound really funny, but ahead of the time.
Yeah.
Like if this came out in the 20 teens, I feel like it would have been handled differently all around the board, and I don't know if it would have the same kind of following. Scott Pilgrim fans really enjoyed it, just for some reason because of how the film was marketed. It didn't entice a lot of people, which was unfortunate for the time. Now, obviously, the movie's made its money back when in its longevity.
Cult classic.
Um, exactly. But regardless of that, yeah, no, it did not see a whole lot of success. Now, Precious Little Life, had a lot of really great success when it was first released, and that really grabbed Edgar Wright's attention like straight away. And a lot of people knew him for Hot Fuzz. A lot of people knew him for Shaun of the Dead. So this was something a little like different. You know, you're not seeing Simon Pegg all the time, and trying to see how that dynamic would really work from page to screen. And I think the fact that Brian Lee O'Malley was there for like hands on with the project so much is what made the film and the book very one to one. But especially when they got near the end of the series, it was still being released as the film was being made. So things actually changed a lot of perspective working on the film
Got a
that
little blurry.
influence. Yeah, yeah, and it caused like some differences for how he handled the books. But we really only get to scratch the surface of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It gets handled really quickly, but believe it or not, unlike the pace of the movie, we really do take our time to get to know these characters. And I can see the influence of the humor and the writing that Edgar Wright is able to take from Brian Lee O'Malley's work in the book. And I love his art. Now I know you have the colored edition, which I'm sure looks fantastic. But to me, I always see these characters in black and white. So being able to picture in my own head what it looks like around them enables a weird fantastical view for me.
Hmm.
Precious Little Life grabbed me so quickly that I was so surprised that I didn't just read this before the movie, but I'm so glad that it was the other way around because it allowed me to see different perspectives. Another one that I enjoy. Scott Pilgrim is 22 in the movie. He starts as 23 in Precious Little Life. So
I
I've
think
been
they
Scott
did
Pilgrim's
that.
age for 2 years.
Cuban Scott Pilgrim's Day for 2 years. Oh,
Yeah.
you're comparing yourself to Scott Pilgrim?
No, just the age. Just like I look at where Scott Pilgrim was and I look where I am and I'm like, man, I am totally not a Scott Pilgrim.
Okay,
And that
good.
feels good.
That is good. That is good.
That's what I'm
What once
saying.
again, Soups. Scott Pilgrim is the scum
A
of the
prick.
earth. He's a prick. However, I know that like later in the books he does have like a little redemption arc and everything.
He has a fantastic redemption arc. And that's the other thing is what I'm saying about the pacing. In the film, it is like just in the span of the weeks, but we go through like 3 years or something like that in the books. And
Yeah,
like Precious Little Life goes over the span of like a good couple of months, but is only like the first 15 minutes of the movie.
precisely. You know, something that was really interesting to me because I know that like you can't put everything into a movie, which is why I
No.
think I'll never forget you and I were talking about this during the whole anniversary and everything of this a year or two ago. And I was talking about how I could see them doing an animated series. And long
Yes,
and
you brought it.
behold, they're doing it. I guessed it with the original cast, too. And
Yes.
they said it's going to be more of an anime, but I'm wondering is it going to be anime in the sense that it's going to adapt his artwork, or is it going to be like an anime? A part of me feels like it's going to be them adapting his artwork into
Oh,
anime.
totally.
I think it's going to be that. But
I think that too. And I'm so excited because now we're actually going to see a direct leap from book to screen. Like
yeah,
in a way that is so one to one, and people will actually get to see, I think, a longer progression to see how Ramona and Scott do become better people by the end of the story in a way that leaves the movie kind of wanting.
yeah. I
You
I
you
love the movie, but it felt like it made our two leads a little bit more one dimensional in that yes, that is them. They're very similar to their comic book counterparts, but we're lacking the depth that we got in later volumes.
right.
Based off of
Doesn't
the
make
stuff
it
I
bad
know.
though.
Yeah, it doesn't make it bad, but it's just something that I've noticed. And I will say the one thing that I have in my notes that's really big and starking, and I even underlined a couple of times, is Scott is different in the book than he is in the movie. And that also goes into something else I wrote is that like the book has a lot more like edge and snark in some of the things that the characters say that's different in the movie, and it makes me wonder, well, it makes me think about how there's so many things that people can interpret differently when it comes to creating an adaptation of things. Scott in the book, he's a little bit more confident his confidence is more like cockiness a little bit and a little bit
Hmm.
more arrogant. Whereas in the movie, he's played by Marco Cera, so he's like more awkward and he's more like quiet. And I don't know. I personally kind of wish we got Book Scott, but it made me think about how did Edgar Wright cast Michael Cera because he's more. You wouldn't be able to like notice him off rip being a jackass, whereas Book Scott, you can instantly know. Okay, he's an asshole.
Um, the reason I believe they chose Michael Cera was just because Edgar Wright thought it would be so funny to see Michael Cera beat the shit out of people.
Hmm.
Like just the concept. Like look at him.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like think about how Michael Cera looks and then be like, well, I can't tell people that I got my ass kicked by Michael Cera.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a different like so that alone. But I thought that Michael Cera was a fantastic cast. Like I think that
Really.
this was the perfect cast. You could like if you took anyone out of this film, it would not be as good. I'm so glad they're all coming back. And here's the thing. Some people could maybe argue, what makes this different from Lord of the Rings getting a series? What's making this different from Harry Potter being remade into a series? That stuff, we got to really see everything. You got to
Yeah.
really see Bilbo and Frodo's journey. Now, granted, Lord of the series is different. Like that's like stuff I believe like prequel. Have not watched it. I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Love it. Love the first three movies. Anyway, um, Harry Potter is fucking pointless.
We got seven
It's
films.
just because it's fucking pointless.
Yeah.
We got everything from the movies, and it's just gonna be super long now. It's just gonna be overly long for things that we've already seen done by a fantastic cast already done. And you already have like what, two, three theme parks based off
Yeah.
that. So what, you're gonna redo your theme parks, or are you gonna make your show look like your movie? In which case, then what is the point?
Yeah. And then honestly,
This,
I noticed that with
mm,
animation, they people are a lot more receptive and accepting of being giving direct adaptations to animation than they are in live action. And I'm wondering, is it because with live action, a lot more people want to put their mark on an adaptation through live action?
mm,
Whereas with animation, it's more of like a direct type of thing. It's like, okay, our art style is based off of this. So there, you're like more willing to be closer to the source material if your if your art direction is that. I don't know.
yeah,
I always wondered why is it that animated adaptations are always usually closer to the source material.
I think it's due to that. I think it's because you have to understand the source material better than say when you do live action. Like think of all the times we've seen like comic book films and we've had directors and cast say like they never picked up a book. And that's what made things like Henry Cavill so exciting because he knew the story.
Hmm.
And that's what makes James Gunn so exciting because like he grew up on this stuff. It's what makes like all this stuff so exciting that things are kind of making a turn now. Marvel needs to kind of fucking straighten this themselves. That AI bullshit, they can't keep doing that. But I mean, other than that, you know what I mean? Like it's so huge now, right? And with that, it just allows there to be a better pacing, I think, as well. That can be done through the ability of having it as an animated series, um, which allows the actors to just get to know the characters longer and become a bit more a part of what it's like to be that person in their shoes. And I think it's so amazing to have the cast come back because they've already stepped their feet into this. And it really shows that when people worked on the movie, they were fans of the story first. And that's why I think, to me, they're like a perfect cast because everyone became a Scott Pilgrim fan because they were part of the movie
Yeah.
and they wanted to be a fan of it, you know, and because they got to actually sit and have a drink with Brian Lee O'Malley and get to like know where the sausage is made. And I feel like that's what made Harry Potter, especially at the beginning, so enchanting. You know, when you allow that collaboration, it becomes really good. And now that they're going to allow it to breathe in a way that it has never before, I think that's also what makes it so exciting, you know?
Hmm. I agree with you on that. Um, I got a lot of different notes I wanted to dive into.
Yeah,
I just got
yeah.
to
You
say,
so
before we get into this even further, I want to say this. When I started reading the book, I realized I liked the book a little bit better than the movie.
are we? Yeah. So I wanted to ask you that. So the book is. Let's start with Precious Little Life, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, and I want to know what your thoughts were with that because that connects a lot with the movie. What about it made it feel better to you? Now, Scott's confidence, the way how he's more cocky, I get that because then you feel like everyone kind of looks at him as like that douchebag, but just like he's the guy in the friend group, we have to have him. He's just always
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, because like in the book, it's like his friends are a lot more like cold and a lot more just honest and saying like, "What the fuck are you thinking, Scott?" And
Yeah,
he just is more of like a jackass in the books, and I think it gives that gives you that extra edge, and it seems more realistic to me. Him just being like
yes.
being more of an asshole. And
Everyone knows a Scott Pilgrim.
yeah, like everyone, like when I was reading this, I could like tell there's a couple different people I like knew when I was younger or have met that was like this dude. And it's weird because it's like he's kind of like a man child in some ways too, because
Yes.
he has this cockiness, this confidence, but I wouldn't even say it's confidence because it feels fake. And especially he has like this grandiose view of different things. It's so weird. He talks about his band saying they suck, and he's like really pessimistic and negative on a lot of different things, or downplays things. And you can tell that his friends are like this close to like snapping at him, but
Dropping this motherfucker, and then he drops the bomb, the very beginning of the story, that Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler,
a 17-year-old, and
a
it's weird.
17-year-old.
Yeah, it's so weird. Now, obviously, that is some pedo territory, and I believe the movie changed it slightly to make it be less creepy by having him be, I think, younger, 22, and then having Knives turning 18 soon. Whereas
Yes.
in the book, she's freshly 17 and he is 23 turning 24.
Now, I will say one thing that was good about how Brian Lee O'Malley handled that relationship to make it so that way by the end of the story you can see Scott being redeemable is the fact that they never like did anything too intimate.
Yeah,
It
nothing
was
too
always
risque.
Knives that kind of pushed it, and it was very clear in both that like Scott has no fucking clue what he's doing. But regardless of it, it's fucked up. Like
Very.
in reality, it is fucked up. But I will say, for the sake of the story, it improves. It gets better, and you understand more of the psychology as to the fact that Scott is just a spiraling tornado. Like this dude just doesn't. It just proves that he just doesn't know what to fucking do with his life, and he's just like floating. And I think
Yeah.
the reason why it's like a high schooler is the fact that Scott never really left high school.
Yeah, especially when we got that little flashback. And I'd say that like this
Oh,
beginning
yep.
volume did such a good job of making him an insufferable asshole. Especially even the comments towards Knives. And something
Yeah.
about our cast being predominantly white and Scott making a big deal to say that she's Chinese.
Yes.
It's giving fetishization. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be blunt soups. It's giving he's fetishizing her, and it's weird.
And his sister does bring it up.
You so his
Like she
sister,
is like that this is fucked up. Like that's the other
yeah,
thing too about this story that makes it easier for me to stomach about these situations and appreciate it and still see the story progression is because there's no one in Scott's life that's like good for you except like the
Steven
dumb teenager
Stills.
of the group.
Steven
Steve,
Stills
well, Steven,
was like,
Steven Stills is like fucking yeah. He's
he's
just like
weird.
stupid.
Yeah.
He's just weird. And spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Can we get the little siren up here real quick?
Wait a second. Wait a second. Are you gonna talk about something in the later volumes?
Yes.
Um.
Just a little. Just it's just one
Okay,
little thing,
that's
and I
fine.
have to bring it up because Oh no, this will come out as we're recording this. It's still Pride Month, but as this comes out, it won't be. So
Oh yeah, he comes out.
for a
He's
little Pride
gay.
Month thing, he is gay,
Yeah, he
and
comes out
so
gay
it shows.
or bi, right?
No, he's gay.
Okay.
That's the thing is while you're watching Scott's story, one thing that the books do so much better is you get to see how everyone else is kind of like struggling with like becoming these adults.
And
And
it's
that's
so
like the
subtle
whole thing
too.
is like struggling to understand that like the high school years are over. Never really
Yeah.
breaking boundaries, which is good. That allows us to never hate these characters. But they just toe the line enough where it feels as though they can't be redeemable in their own aspects. And Still's stuff is done so like in under the water because Scott doesn't pay much attention. But as Scott becomes better as a friend, we as the audience can become better insightful with his friend group, and you can feel that progression in everyone in their own ways, even though we're not always following other people, which we do in the book. We follow around people a lot more than just being through Scott, like and we'll bring it up when we talk more about versus the world comic, but like when we get to hang out with like Ramona and stuff and see what she does. But yeah, besides that, like it shows that kind of like struggle. No one really knows what they're doing. They're in a band that sucks. Their only fan is the 17-year-old
And young Neil.
and young Neil who
I love
loves
young Neil.
Zelda.
I love young Neil. He's great. I
Yeah.
would say, you bring up the whole Steven Stills thing. I'm remembering now. Something that I heard is that like if you start from the beginning of the book, knowing what you know about him being gay, there's little things that are like done in the background where you basically see the progression to that. And some
Yeah.
people even theorized him saying that negative stuff at the beginning was him trying to like perpetuate, oh, I'm straight, I'm supposed to say this.
Yeah.
When in actuality, that's not what he's thinking. Uh, Great storytelling, and honestly, even when you said that, we start seeing more of his friends' backgrounds and stories or whatnot, that's unfolding as he becomes closer with his friends. That's a great touch as well too. I would say that my favorite character in these two books, though, would
Yes.
have to be Kim.
Yes.
I love
Kim is the
Kim.
best.
Kim was
I have a
really done
big
the
crush on
dirtiest, though.
Kim.
Kim was done the dirtiest, and
Yes.
I would say, yeah, Kim is great. Kim is great, and
Yeah.
she's hilarious. And I don't know, it was fun, especially seeing her little backstory and just a lot of different things. And she's the one who's the most skeptical of Scott, and not even skeptical. I'd say flat out, like just calling him out, reading him to filth. But I think as the reader, you don't really. I don't want to say you don't pay attention to it because it's very clear as day. But the book kind of downplays the way she's basically reading him to filth, but it's
Yeah.
almost, you could even argue it's from the perspective of Scott. So even Scott isn't really taking what she's saying as serious.
Yes. Yes, and that's the thing with it too. Um, I mean, there's still a lot I want to talk about with Precious Little Life. I want to talk about Matthew Patel and stuff, but real quick, because you brought up the Adult Swim short, the beginning of Versus the World is that short, and we get a whole lot more information in the comic, and some of it just becomes a montage in the Adult Swim short. But it does a fantastic job articulating that, and it gives a lot of insight for Kim Pine, and only people who had seen that short will then have that like look on her in the film, and it makes her interesting in the movie too.
Mm-hmm.
There's Kim Pine is such a fantastic character, and she gets some of the worst shit, and she gets better, and that's the thing is we get to see that progression between them throughout the rest of the books, and it's all done just so little by little, and with being a first time reader or first time watcher, you don't really think about it much because everyone is like him like that as well. So what makes Kim so different? This is what makes Kim so different,
Who's your
and
favorite
that's cool.
character, during this reread?
Oh, dude, um, probably Kim. Like honestly, like I really do love Kim. I love also seeing how Knives' progression is just a lot better handled than in the movie. She doesn't get a whole lot of that progression in the same way, and I feel like she's done probably the most dirty in the film.
Yeah.
Out of all the characters, is wonderful. She is so sweet and so innocent. She doesn't deserve any of this shit, but she learns so much about herself too in the later books. She has such an amazing turn, and you become so proud of her at the end, knowing how better she is than all of these people.
Hmm.
And that's like a cool thing too of this outside perspective because Knives is so smart and she's just lost over this idea of someone finding something of her because she's just stuck in her own traditions and paths, you know. Um, so Knives is a close second, but Kim, always looking back through Kim's story, looking back and knowing where Kim and Scott are going to go again, makes me so excited for the anime. Just like, dude, like it's so fun to be a Scott Pilgrim fan.
Honestly, yeah, I do like Knives a lot, and Knives. You touched on how like her progression is done handled better in the book than it is in the movie, and I understand that you can't do everything in the movie, but
Yeah,
I feel like they simplified her progression in the movie. But when they simplified it, they cut out like some of the key points in when simplifying it. And the one character though who great, fantastic. They didn't really have to change anything, and they didn't change much. Who I would say is my second favorite within these two books is Wallace Wells. Wallace is so
yes.
fucking hilarious, and Wallace. I'm pretty sure we learn why Wallace is so loyal to Scott later. Do we learn that
Mm.
later?
Yeah, no, yeah, like their progression deepens a bit too.
Okay.
It's
Uh,
it's mainly just at the end of the day though, it's just because, and you see it from Precious Little Life alone.
mm.
Scott's just a loser. Scott's just a
So
loser,
does he
and
pity
Wallace.
Wallace? I mean, does Wallace pity him?
Oh, totally. Like it gets established straight away. Like that's why Wallace never lets up on him. My goal is to just have that Wallace Wells energy of just being yourself and not letting shit kind of like change that. You know what I mean? Wallace is a fantastic character, and he doesn't really change a whole lot in the story. He's one of the characters that stay consistent, especially in these first two books. But he's a fantastic character for comic relief as well as character development, and he helps us keep a more grounded look as into Scott's ridiculousness. The fact that you go through their apartment, which is just this cinder block, and the side of like the wall of somewhere, and
That is a weird ass
everything.
apartment though.
Yeah, everything in there belongs to Wallace, and it says like Scott. I think the only thing that they showed was that Scott only owns like his jacket. I think that was it,
And it
like
was
a
a
pile of
shitty
clothes.
jacket. Yeah.
Yes, it
and
was a
and a
shitty
poster
jacket.
and a poster.
Yeah, shitty
Yeah,
poster.
I just loved how even the movie was able to like do that diagram justice. You know, something that I learned when I was doing some
Yeah.
research for this episode is that Brian Lee O'Malley, you know how so a lot of times whenever an artist is also the writer of a book or something like that, they just have their own different type of way of working on things. So you either
Mm.
have an artist draw everything out and then write in the dialogue when they're done, or you have someone who plots it out. Brian Lee O'Malley, when he was I was doing some research, it turns out he said that he basically writes almost like a movie script, and he then draws based off of that. And I think that's the reason why this book was so easy to translate well
Yeah.
to live action. Because some of these panel work, some of it is can be confusing, but I think it's confusing because some of it is like camera movements almost, or either things that require motion almost. Am I making
Mm.
sense?
No, no, it does. It does make sense.
Yeah.
Now we can't have Scott without Ramona, and we can't have Ramona without the X's. So, before anything, I need to know from these two books, Matthew Patel or Lucas Lee, which one is your favorite?
Honestly, based off the books, I would have to say Lucas Lee. Yeah, Lucas Lee. And then even in the movie,
Lucas Lee.
Lucas Lee. Lucas Lee, fantastic. In the book, I like that he was a chill dude. He was chill. And it was
Yeah.
another moment where Scott is an asshole. And, you know, something I liked about in the movie, is that I know that we were talking about the differences between Scott as a character in the book and where he is in the movie. Him being an asshole still does shine through in the movie, but it's like I think it's the type of asshole that makes me mad personally.
Mm.
I hate the type of assholes who are very passive aggressive with the fact that they're assholes. And movie
Mm.
Scott gives me those vibes. So
Whereas comic Scott, he's kind of just so out with it
yeah,
and just like incompetent about it.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, like the way how he handles both the fights too shows that Matthew Patel, he blows it off. Like the way how you see it in the film is pretty close to how it is in the book.
It's literally the
Um,
same. Yeah,
yeah, like I think maybe some of the wording's changed, but even like the flashback that Ramona has in the movie is the same. Like they just pull it from the book,
mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah,
love
don't they
Matthew
pull the
Patel.
they pull the actual like panels from the
Yeah, it's
book?
just panel for panel,
Yeah,
and I love that. I love how connected the book and the movie do get. Like there is a collaborative effort here, even though they do take different avenues. That's cool. That's how you should interpret different work when you adapt it. That's something that I appreciate about it, even if there's things that I miss. And Matthew Patel, I think, was done super well. I need to pull up the names of the evil X's because I want to get the actor's name. I should have pulled this up earlier. Obviously, Lucas Lee is Chris Evans, Captain America. Um, so League of Evil X's. Where
I gotta say,
is?
this is completely off topic. So sorry.
Oh,
Uh,
you're fine.
little tangent. My favorite joke ever in the fucking movie is when Scott is stalking Ramona at the damn party, and he goes up to the guy who knows everybody, and he's like, "Do you know a girl that looks like this?" And it's like a picture of the squiggly lines that's like
Yes.
faintly in the
Yeah.
shape of Ramona's head. That shit is funnier than the book. Oh my god. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Okay. Yeah. In
interesting.
Precious Little Life, when he just puts like his fingers down his sideburns, it is a little different.
Yeah.
I'll have editor Jay just say the actor's name here,
Sacha Baba.
but Matthew Patel is just exactly how you get him, beginning to end. It's gonna be like that when the anime comes out too, I'm sure. But that's fine. Like he has a fantastic start, and the fact that Scott just really blows him off, because Matthew Patel sends him an email, like he's trying to keep so much communication. He's the first gateway through, and he's just so disrespected. And it's funny, and it's so in character. Lucas Lee's like, if you just pay me, I'll say you kicked my ass.
Exactly.
Like we don't have to do this, but if we do, I'll mess you up. So I'm trying to get you an out. Whereas with Chris Evans, he really is just like that bad boy, and it works very well for the film. But being able to see where he is in the comic, especially because Lucas Lee is beginning to end in the comic, we get to see how Scott progresses and figuring out a way to handle each X, and getting to know how to figure out how to fight Lucas Lee. And that's when we get to the cinematic ending when he does a grindy thingy. And um, I just love that. I just enjoy how they've been able to find the essence of both the characters and bring it to life in different ways.
Exactly.
Even though it was not too different from the comic, Matthew Patel just adds so much enthusiasm and really is the kickstart as to this is where the movie is gonna get really weird. You just got to, and the comic too. Like this is where things are going to get so bizarre. Luke and Matthew Patel is just a perfect introduction to that, especially when we get into later X's.
Um,
Um,
I gotta say something that I wrote down that I also noticed as a difference between the books and the movie. The movie does a really good job of like doing its like humor, taking the humor bits from the book, and you know it kind of feels like Edgar Wright made it his own with the humor that he went forward with. Cool, great, but I feel like the book's humor got me at a couple of points, especially
yeah.
when it was like very meta at times. For example, there's a part where one of the characters said, oh, "Okay, maybe that'll happen in volume 4, maybe volume 3," or like the fourth wall breaks, or
Mm-hmm.
even just some of the dialogue, and it's interesting because earlier we were talking about how it was the movie's fast paced compared to the book. The book, it was very fast paced in the beginning, same type of pace that the movie started with, and then it slowed down as the book went further. But there's
Yeah.
moments where it like ramps up. I kind of wish the movie kind of did something similar because the movie still felt like it was just fast paced all throughout the entire movie.
Yeah. No, but that was just kind of like Edgar Wright's style that he was trying with the film as well to kind of because he's compiling a whole story that wasn't even finished yet, wasn't even published into 1 hour and a half. And this is the only way that they're going to get something like this as big as it is, you know? Like this really was a Hail Mary. Kind of like how Tank Girl was for their creators.
Yeah.
Um and kind of like how a lot of these different superhero movies kind of started off as because people just weren't into the idea. Now, granted, Scott Pilgrim isn't really like a superhero thing, but if it wasn't for comics and superheroes, we wouldn't have Scott Pilgrim.
Precisely. You know something? Scott Pilgrim. I've noticed during the research for it, Brian Lee O'Malley originally did not like the idea of this being turned into a movie or any type of adaptation because he felt as though the
Oh,
people, yeah, he didn't like the idea of it. He felt that whoever was going to work on it was going to change too much shit about the source material when adapting. However, money talks. He agreed because of money, and I don't blame him.
mm,
I don't blame him.
no, no, you can't. You can't. And especially for something as big of an intellectual property as it's become now, you know, with limited edition figures and Funko Pops. I have two vinyls from the movie. I have one of the instrumentals, and I have one of all of like the soundtrack stuff.
I would like a vinyl from this movie. The soundtrack is just fucking
Um,
amazing.
my vinyl was the Ramona Flowers edition. So when I got it, I didn't know if it was going to be red, blue, or green, like how her hair changes throughout the film, and that was really cool. I
Okay.
think mine came out as pink, not red, pink. Um, and I just love that they get to be so fucking creative with that, and that's so wild. I had no clue that Brian Lee O'Malley was skeptical, especially when I think of the fact that like his style is still covered this film if you know his work on top of all of Edgar Wright's stuff. Now, I got to know real quick then. I know you're a fan of the books. Between Precious Little Life and Versus the World, the comic, which one did you really enjoy and why?
Bitch, why are we on the same wavelength? 'Cause I was gonna ask you that same question right before you said that.
No way.
Oh my god.
That was kind of wild.
What the
Daenerys,
fuck?
can you believe that stuff? Oh my god. That's what I'm saying.
We're retiring that button. Anyways,
I don't know. Howard's not going to like that.
Daenerys,
He really likes
please.
that duck.
Daenerys, please stop egging Jay on. Thank you. Anyways, I gotta say, I liked Versus the World better.
Oh my god. Thank you, Daenerys. Thank you. Go on, Damon.
Okay, but no, I gotta say, with that, I would say Versus the World was better. And you wanna know my reasonings why? My reasonings why is because we got a lot more meat and potatoes in this. We got a whole background for Scott. And also, the background gave us a lot of information. Scott was a dick in high school, too. He was rude as fuck to Lisa Miller. Uh,
Yes, Lisa was so sweet. So
yeah.
good, you know?
And it honestly though, even though him being dicky, it made me think about certain things because on one hand, some of the stuff that the way he was acting and the way he was very dismissive and not really like noticing things, and even when he said that he doesn't like being bothered when like chewing food and everything like that. It made me wonder: the Scott Pilgrim is he neurodivergent?
Um, wow.
And
We're
apparently,
getting
I
some
looked
heavy
it up,
topics.
and
I'm not
I looked
sure.
it up, and there are some fan theories, and I think someone said it may have been confirmed in canon. I don't know.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I gotta look into that more. But Soups, if you guys know, please let us know. That'd be pretty awesome if you let
That
us know.
that
I'm
could explain
curious.
some things too. In its own way, if you interpret it a different way, it can explain things in a new perspective than just the idea of him plainly being an asshole. I think that's interesting, but I've never really heard about that much.
Yeah.
But I agree with you though. I love Versus the World a lot more. Being able to get a little sneak peek into Envy Adams and what's going to happen next was like such a great little like cliffhanger.
Yeah. And then Kim
Knives,
having her little thing too.
Knives, learning that she has been cheated on at this early on in the game, as opposed near the end of the movie. Like she gets that realization when they're fighting Gideon, and that's like a different. Just because of that placement, it changes everything. It changes how Knives is going to respond because there is still like what 4 more books after this.
Hmm.
So how is she going to respond to all of that? And the fight at the mall. I'm so looking forward to seeing how that's going to be done in animation. I
Yeah.
love the mall scene. I love being able to see Ramona's powers. I can't even believe we haven't talked about Ramona yet. We have to. But
Yeah, I just remembered that
and
Ramona had a lot more in the do in the book.
so much more, and we kind of get to understand where she is, and the fact that she stays such a mystery, and then the mystery becomes so like warped and twisted. And I'll save that if we ever do a part
And
two.
she has a glowing
But
head,
yes,
which
I
is
I
very
will
important.
save. I will not tell you why. I
Yeah.
will keep that to myself. But
And
yeah,
super
no,
strength, which they don't talk about in the movies.
no. Another thing that they don't really touch on a ton is the subspace highway. So
Yeah.
Ramona Flowers, I guess let's talk about her.
Yeah.
She has the ability to use the subspace highway. She works for Amazon.ca. If you want to use that website, that will be Amazon.ca. And yeah, she has all these different powers. She can go into Scott's dreams, like through the subspace highway, because that's what it is her using the powers to go through people's dreams to make it across in like no time at all. So it's like a teleportation in its own strange way. She has the ability to open doors,
Think
which
Sandman. Think Morbius from Sandman.
yes,
Yeah, he does that type of shit.
yeah, it's just like that, yeah. Um, and the movie doesn't really talk about it. Like we see it like a little bit, but it's done in like stylized version of like them making it home, like, and they replicate that from Precious Little Life of them running to a door with a star on it, very Super Mario 2. um
They even play the song in the movie
and
too, I think.
I think, well, no, they play a lot of Legend of Zelda music.
Yeah, very well. Oh no, my God, I'm thinking back to when I seen it in
Yeah,
theaters with Dolby. That shit sounded so good.
wasn't it so enchanting?
It was.
They really handled that well. They respected the material that they were like showing inspiration and style to. Um, for again, Switch fans, Tears of the Kingdom, it sounds just as good, but I think this is my favorite version of Fairy Well when I hear it on my vinyl. I love getting to hear it. Man, but no, Ramona, she has this giant fucking mallet, right? That can just cave people's heads in. So Harley Quinn. I love
Yeah.
that kind of shit. And she's on the rollerblades and stuff. She's really badass. But she's such a mystery, and sometimes she can be such a dick. And something about that just draws Scott. And
I think she missed in the movie. Ramona Flowers gets categorized as like a manic pixie dream girl whenever people bring up that trope because of the
yes,
movie. Whereas in the book, I feel like it's another case of the movie having to simplify things because it's a movie. Ramona
yeah,
in the book, she has more of an edge. I'd say similar to how like Scott had a kind of an edge in the book too. Like Scott was like outwardly an asshole, but he also was like an asshole who would be like, if you like pushed him, he'd be like, "What the fuck? Why did you fucking push me?" Like he's ready to fight. Like he's on tip. Ramona's very chill, but yeah, like you said, she can be kind of rude. She can be a little brash, but she can be very blunt as well too. And she is still kind of aloof, but in the movie, I think they just primarily focused on her aloofness instead of focusing on the
yes.
other parts.
I agree. She kind of weirdly enough gets a backseat, which kind of sucks because Scott Pilgrim's story is about everyone. But it's also about her. You know, everything that Scott does is because of her. One thing that the movie does very well is you see that none of the actions that are done is because Scott goes forth and does it. It's other people that push him into the situation. And it's not until the end of the film when he finally makes a decision by himself. Um, and that is shown a lot through the books as well, especially in these two. You know, he's not really trying to like get his ass kicked, but he really just likes this girl, and it just shows how really complicated he's allowed his life to become because he's not really been an active part in his life. It's been other people that make him into these things. He's not a great bassist, but his friends are in a band, and that was something that meant something to him before in high school, but lost interest as he becomes a 23-year-old that's so lost in the past of what he left behind when he moved.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I feel like Ramona does a great job of showing like how Scott tries to grow into the idea of becoming a more active person. He can't get up to see knives for any point. He will think that it's like so early in the morning, but it's like 1 in the afternoon. But he's able to like get up and want to try to be active, and it's kind of cool in its own kind of way, and it feels so natural. And you start to see as to how these two could work together, but kind of just how much of a meltdown they are together. It's
Okay.
so interesting of a roller coaster how him and Ramona interact. And I think Ramona being this character of really just trying to live her life, not really a fan of the shit that happened before, coming to Canada to try to fix things and redo her life. It shows that she was trying to get on a different path, and Scott kind of anchors her into another way that may not be good or it may not even be bad, but it's different, and she
Hmm.
hopes that it's different, and it becomes very difficult, and you kind of wonder if he really is going to be different from Lucas Lee or Matthew Patel. And I enjoy that, and Ramona brings that out of the character and allows us to see that external confrontation that is so internal in Scott that we don't get a whole lot of until we start to see him develop.
I gotta say, what would you rate these two books
Uh,
out of five?
oh, 5. I have a bias, but I think these are fantastic. These are books that kind of kept me interested in the idea of even wanting to do Super Saturdays. Scott Pilgrim is such a great story, and because of that, I've read a bunch of other Brian Lee's work. Right now, I'm reading his story Seconds, which is about this woman who had made this wonderful restaurant, but now she's trying to start anew. But there's a lot of this different mystery and intrigue and like other dream states and stuff. I haven't gotten super far since we started the show because we've been reading other stuff and watching other stuff. But I would love to come back to Brian Lee's O'Malley's work with Seconds and see what you think, see what the soups think, and get a better understanding of what Brian Lee O'Malley does as a creator outside of just Scott Pilgrim,
Hmm.
which he's become so coined with, right?
So you'd give these two books a 5 out of 5?
This is my first like 5 out of 5. This is something that I think is just a perfect read for especially someone who's growing up and becoming more into adulthood, whether you knew someone like this or even if you were like this. The, there's a dynamic or a character or something thematically I think everyone can kind of take from this. Whether you have the original editions, whether you have these new in color editions, or even if you're just a fan of the movie and kind of want to see what's going on after or what's really going on in between. Uh, I think it's just been handled so well, besides its marketing when it first came out, to be worth a read for anyone, especially as you're growing up. What about you, Damon?
Um, I would rate the Precious Little Life a 4 out of 5. Uh,
Okay.
and I'd rate Versus the World 5 out of 5. I liked both of these. They were
No
really good
way.
reads.
Really?
Yeah. It was a really good read. It was a fun ride, and Scott is a complete dick. And I personally don't really like Scott Pilgrim as a character, but I'd be lying if it wasn't a good written book and a good written story and a good movie. And I will say, this is our second time doing any type of story with an unlikable protagonist, and I will say I'm really curious about where the story goes forward, and I actually do want to read more Scott Pilgrim.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful. And I hope that Soups at Home will maybe want to hear next because we can then go to volume 3 and 4 and see what happens next in Scott and his next challenges and how it's changed from the movie still. I would love to talk about Scott Pilgrim more.
exactly. Same. I'd like to do it. But you know what? What do you guys think? Do you guys think that Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life holds up? And do you think Scott Pilgrim versus the World hold up? Be sure to give us your answers by reviewing the show or messaging us on Instagram at Super Saturdays Podcast, TikTok at Super Saturdays Pod, and Twitter at Super Saturday PC. Your messages and reviews can make their way on the show. This was Super Saturdays. I'm Damon.
And I'm Jay Hayward. Make sure you also check out Damon and I on our Instagrams at Damon_1003 and at Jay the Movie Gal.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about the man who can escape any trap, Mr. Miracle,
Mr. Miracle.
the son of
Let's
Dark
go.
Side. All right. See you next Saturday, Soups.